Our next presenter is the distinguished alumni that was nominated by the Mechanical Engineering, Mr. Monzer Chammas. He's been a graduate, of course, of AUB Mechanical Engineering. After he finished his Bachelor in Engineering, he went to Montreal and made a Master of Business Administration in Finance. And his life led him into a management position at Petrofac, where he currently resides in Dubai in the home office of Petrofac. So, Monzer, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much for coming.
Good afternoon, esteemed guests, Dean Shadi, faculty members. First of all, I would like to thank the members of the Mechanical Engineering Department who nominated me for this Distinguished Young Alumnus Award. I would like to thank Dean Shadi, of course, and everyone else involved. I'm truly humbled for being chosen for this award. I'm also thankful for all of you for giving me this great opportunity to come back to AUB and reminisce the old days. 17 years ago, AUB armed me with a group of my friends with a mechanical engineering degree and told us to go and live abundantly and make something out of our lives. As far as I can see, most of my classmates, if not all, are distinguished in their own fields. And we all have AUB to thank for this. Just as a matter of feedback, I would like to update my alma mater on what I have done in these years, briefly, hoping that I would make her proud. After completing my education and military service in 2000, I headed straight for the Arabian Gulf for a career with Petrofac, the company I still work for today. My spirits were high, my expectations were high, even temperatures were very high. I didn't let this bother me, at least for a while, because I was focused on learning. I was assigned to go to the construction site almost immediately. I did that for 5 consecutive years before I started thinking that I need to somehow boost my career by maybe acquiring an MBA. I did some research and found a suitable university that has a good program and applied and got accepted in HEC Montreal in Canada. After completing that, in high distinction, I focused on finance and investments. I came back to Petrofac in 2006 to a more managerial role based in the home office as a project engineer. By working on 6 more projects, I made my way up to director level by 2015. Over the course of these years, I had been exposed to construction management, commissioning, project management, project development, proposals and estimation, and business development. But the journey hasn't been easy, especially that the oil and gas industry is not really a simple one. And making a successful career in it is not always guaranteed. This is why I chose this as a topic for my presentation today. The oil and gas industry has been under the microscope recently, not only with respect to its negative impact on the environment, but especially with respect to its highly volatile nature and the recent downturn, which not only affects that industry, but also others as well. During the course of this presentation, I will first give a brief introduction on the history of oil and gas, and then discuss some of the economic factors that govern the industry. And then I will touch on the possible career options for prospective engineers before summarizing the whole thing. Okay, so a little introduction about the industry and how it started. The Industrial Revolution in the 19th century generated an increasing demand for more fuel, which was initially met by coal and, believe it or not, whale oil. This was not enough, and besides, coal is not considered a very clean fuel, and you wouldn't think killing whales for oil would last long. An American gentleman named Edwin Drake was the first person who actually drilled the first conventional well, who was actually abandoned by the same company that hired him, but he continued successfully. That happened in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859. Even though oil wells were not a new thing, because they were actually dated back to 400 AD when the Chinese used to actually drill using bamboo, because it was, still very primitive. Drake's methodology resembled in principle the modern oil well, which has drilling equipment and the hard casing to maintain the well structure. So what's oil and gas used for? It's a fossil fuel used for mainly heating, transportation, electricity. And if that's not enough, the raw material gives you chemicals, fertilizers, and plastics. Moving on to look at the value chain. You can really break it up into three: upstream, midstream, and downstream. In the upstream, that's where the exploration and field development activities happen. Geotechnical and drilling services are, of course, a part of this. This can be onshore, either onshore or offshore. Midstream is the next phase where the raw material, whether it's oil or gas, can be processed initially into easily traded products. These products can be transported or stored using various methods. And the last is the downstream phase, which is the part of the industry where hydrocarbon products are refined into everyday fuels like gasoline, kerosene, and in the case of petrochemicals, olefins and aromatics. So what are the type of companies involved in the core oil and gas industry activities? First, I've categorized this in terms of contract execution. So basically, the top employs the bottom, which means the oil companies employ service companies employ suppliers and subcontractors. So first you have the main oil companies. Just as a note, I've included petrochemicals here. Now petrochemicals may be considered, or actually considered, in the chemical industry by itself. But it's closely related, so I've decided to put it in here. These are the main exploration and production companies. They are involved in the high risk, high reward area of exploration and production, focused on finding, augmenting, producing, and merchandising different types of oil and gas. This includes national oil companies who have exclusive rights, or maybe near exclusive rights, for the control of their oil's production, for their country's oil production. Now, the other type of companies are the IOCs, what we call IOCs, international oil companies, who you've heard of them, BP, Shell, Total, and they acquire rights to drill and are vertically integrated companies with global operations spanning the entire chain that we saw earlier. Second are the service companies, and that's where I fit in, because I work for a service company. They are more focused, some of them are focused on upstream to deliver specific technical expertise, like geotechnical or geophysical surveys and drilling. Others work as engineering and construction companies, E&C contractors. And a third type would be the management consultants. The third type of companies that I've categorized are the suppliers and the specialized subcontractors that are hired by service companies to provide equipment, technologies, bulk material, and expertise to execute projects. The oil and gas industry really spawned a handful of important historical events. As we said, the initial main event was the drilling of the first oil in 1859. That led the way to the creation of a very big oil company called Standard Oil that actually was forced to break up by the government because it got too big. In 1960, President Eisenhower at the time, he placed import tax on all oil coming from the Gulf and from Venezuela. So the leaders of these countries, they got together and they decided they want to do something about this. And that's when OPEC was born. The 1973 oil embargo by the Arabs, most of us probably heard about this, had created a big spike in the oil price. The Iranian crisis in '79 did the same. And during these two periods, because of the low oil supply, the rest of the countries decided to invest in projects which created a lot of supply, surplus supply in the 1980s that created an oil glut, what we call an oil glut, basically a drop in price. In 1989, we had the Exxon Valdez oil spill. It wasn't a big spill, but it was the first major oil spill that happened that, it was the most remarkable because it showed the real threat of the oil to the environment. The first Gulf War in 1990 experienced a brief spike in price. In 2008, the oil price peaked at $147 a barrel. In 2010, we had a major disaster in the deepwater spill in the Gulf of Mexico that left 11 dead and spilled almost 5 million barrels in the sea. And 2014 was the start of the 2010s oil glut, which we're calling the 2010s oil glut, where you have a surplus supply, and it created the recent drop in price. Moving on to the industry economics, trying to be quick because I have limited time. Five? Okay. So this is a supply. World supply is at about 98 million barrels a day. In 2014, we had considerably more supply than demand, which you'll see in the next slide. And you might not think it's a lot, but even 500,000 barrels can create a huge drop in price. And this was the case here in 2014. End of 2014, there was almost a 40% drop in oil price because there was a million barrels extra in the market. These are the top oil suppliers as of 2016. Now, you may have heard some reports where it says the United States has surpassed Saudi Arabia or Russia, but that probably happened for a brief period of time. But they are certainly getting there. Of course, if you add up the OPEC countries here, you'll have a much more considerable force: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, UAE, Kuwait, and Venezuela. So you'll have 50% of all that production coming from OPEC countries. This is the price of oil. It shows the historical price of oil over the last 70 years. It shows the volatility of this commodity. This is adjusted for inflation, of course. And you can see the effect of the crises I mentioned earlier. Here's the 1973 oil embargo by the Arabs. It showed a big jump in the price. Here in the 1990 war, there's also a sudden spike. And this is when it went all the way up. The growth that was, the economical growth, especially by China, that drove the prices up because of high demand. So what's happening? These are the four main reasons for the current downturn. Slowing economies, mainly China. They're not drinking up oil as much as they used to. The strong US dollar, because the oil price is actually denominated, the barrel is denominated in US dollars, it's actually hurting demand. OPEC and other suppliers' resilience, because they want to maintain their market share. Nobody's ready to give up their market share. And last, but definitely not least, the oversupply. That's the main reason behind the plunge. The United States shale gas revolution has started. And it turned out to maybe this is a permanent game changer for world oil supply. In 2014, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, reported that the US has become the largest oil and natural gas producer, surpassing Russia and Saudi Arabia for a brief period. So what is shale? This is the culprit that single-handedly caused this recent oil crash. We'll just explain it very quickly. Shale rock is a sedimentary rock composed of mud and a mix of minerals. Now, shale oil and gas is oil and gas that is trapped in these formations right here, in this section of the well. So this is like a conventional well. You'll drill it like any other well. But then you go horizontally to the shale gas formations. Even though shale oil extraction dated back to the mid-19th century, the recent advancement in horizontal drilling techniques and the hydraulic fracturing, technique called hydraulic fracturing, has mainly caused this to become very common in the United States in the last couple of years. The US has many large shale rock formations. Some rough estimates say that the reserve in the US alone is 3.7 trillion barrels. Just to give you a perspective here, the Saudi oil reserves are estimated at 260 billion barrels. So there's a lot of oil that's going to come from the States. How is this extraction done? It's using a process called hydraulic fracturing. After inserting a casing in here, a perforating gun equipped with a special explosive charge is inserted, and after firing, holes are made in the horizontal casing right here. And then you insert water plus chemicals under high pressure mixed with sand, and that will cause the cracks in the rocks. And very soon after that, you get oil or gas, whatever that's trapped there, you get it flowing out of the well. Some people say that it takes 3 to 5 months to drill this well, which is considerably quick. Recent layoffs, I'll just skim through this quickly. 350,000 jobs were lost since 2014 from the oil and gas business. A lot of these companies are now actually looking for talent. So we've experienced a loss of talent. They're trying to get back some of the people that they lost, but some of them went to other industries. What are the competition? Competition are, as we know, renewables, wind, solar, hydropower, waste to energy. These are all very good, and we are all supportive of this. However, the problem is maybe availability, scalability, and storage. Coal is the second one, which is also not very, very recommended, as it's a bit hurtful to the environment more than oil. Nuclear is also very promising, but we all remember disasters that scare us. So in theory, oil is still and will remain the primary source because it's reliable, available, and transportable, and now is very cheap. The important part, I need 2 more minutes, 1 minute. This is the conclusion. The guys have to know what the industry can employ and whether it's a good time to be in the oil and gas business or not. Mechanical engineers can work in piping, rotating, static, HVAC, even metallurgy. Chemical engineers can work in the process and in commissioning and operations. Civil engineers, of course, in geosciences, surveying, infrastructure, buildings, etc. Environmental engineers, electrical engineers, computer electronics, and telecom engineers can work in automation and controls. Other main functions, which my advice to you guys, future leaders, is when you join an industry like the oil and gas industry, you need to be focused on what you want to do and what you like to do. Engineering management is one area where you can get into. Project management also. Proposals estimation, supply chain, construction management, contracts management, quality management, and HSSE. These are all functions in the oil and gas industry that will allow you to be a versatile professional, where you can actually, in case the situation gets very bad, you can actually move to other industries with these talents. So as a summary, oil and gas is a cyclical and volatile industry. The shale revolution may have changed the whole game now. Oil remains as the #1 source of fuel, but a career in oil and gas, even though it's a little less lucrative than maybe 5 years ago, can give you a lot of options. Thank you.